Media are platforms to amplify your message. Focus on your message first, then build the community with whatever media works first, and build up your base on social platforms, and then let them know that there is a podcast and get them to join your podcast.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, what's up, podcaster? Today, I'm joined with somebody that I've been following on social for quite a while. We have a lot of friends, mutual friends as well. But Steve Sims speaks on so many different stages out there. He's got his podcast. We're actually wanted to mention his book because it's brand new and you can grab it today. So we'll be talking about the book. You might have seen him speak a few times. He's just crushing it. Steve, I feel like you speak in like different cities and states and countries. Is that true?
This year has been crazy. This year I actually did, I think it was 30 or 32 gigs, literally all over the planet. So it was a ridiculous year of stage, and I will not be repeating that next year.
How did you do that anyway? Like, how are you able to be at 30-something places? That's basically traveling once a week.
Yeah, so what I tend to do, I have a whole strategy behind this as well.
Okay.
And it's one of the things I teach within my community, funny enough. So here it is. Any of you out there looking a bit more visual on the speaking circuit, this is a great tip. Most big events have what I call satellite events around them. So like, for argument's sake, Traffic and Conversion in San Diego, the Comic-Con of marketing, is the largest marketing and branding conference in the planet. But every morning, evening, a couple of days prior, a couple of days after, there's all these other entrepreneur groups that come into San Diego that host other events. And so what I do is I usually let people know that I am keynoting there, and then I get other events. When I did I was one of the keynote speakers at Traffic and Conversion this year, and I had 4 other gigs. I had 2 on the Monday before, then my gig was on the Wednesday, and then I had one on the Thursday. So you actually are able to get satellite gigs around the main gig.
I like that. That's cool. I've spoken at a few conferences, like in my whole life, probably the same amount that you did in 2 months, but it's been cool. And usually what I'll do is maybe I'll fly out to DFW and I'll create a meetup in Plano. Like I'll create my own. Yeah. And maybe 120 people come, buy everybody drinks and food, and we'll just connect. And then everybody leaves being like, that was cool what Adam did. And I'm usually top of mind. So I don't do the satellites, but this was a really cool way for you to share that. Is you're going to be keynoting at Traffic and Conversion. Let's see what other satellites are out there and say, hey, I'm already going to be there. Do you want me to add this value to your audience or something like that? It's pretty cool.
This year was also hectic and heavily saturated because something happened which was a bit unfair. But COVID came across, and I had gigs in 2020, 21, 22, and they all got bumped. Okay. Now, here's the thing that I thought was quite unfair. A lot of the major event space actually allowed them to move their event because of COVID. But the second 2022 came up, they gave them 12 months to be able to use that credit. So there were a lot of events that were maybe in 2019 or 2020 that all of a sudden couldn't span their events over. So this year, I would say there were probably 3 times more events in the planet than there were over any normal year.
Okay. I have some questions for you.
Good.
I want to just have you at least tell us what your book is at the beginning. We'll talk about it at the end, but I want to then get into like your podcast journey and what the success you've got for it. So
sure. The book
is
called
Stupid.
Go for Stupid, The Art of Achieving Ridiculous Goals.
And okay, so what does it mean, go for stupid? When you're saying stupid, do you just mean do ridiculous things that like nobody would have ever expected, or what?
Bingo. Couldn't be better than that. You see, too many times we try to go for impossible, or we try to go for what we can achieve. You don't know what you can achieve, and why go for something that immediately has got a brick wall in front of it? But if you can go for something that's stupid, something that's ridiculous, something that's laughable, it opens up the creativity side of your brain, and you suddenly start dreaming. Now, I'm not saying that you can play hockey on the moon, but you will go for stuff that is far in excess of what you felt you could have achieved just by changing a parameter of your mindset.
I love it. And when you were launching this book, I think you may have done one or two things. One, I absolutely remember because I reached out to you. You made a post on social. So you've already got a podcast.
Yep.
And then you were publishing this book and you reach out on social and you're basically talking to anybody who has a platform, like podcasters. And you're saying, hey, I've got this great book. Does anyone want to have me on their show and we can talk about it? And I think that's a good takeaway for the listener to just say, oh, okay, I've got my podcast. And when I launch a book later on, I could go on social and do that. So that's part of it. And the second part, so I want to ask you why you did that. But the second part is like, I'm curious as to how does the book play into the podcast as well. So we can talk about that in a moment, but why did you post it on social saying, does anybody want to have me on their show? Like, why was that important and what's happening from that post?
So I have a branding agency, Sims.media, and I'm always watching the media's platforms to see which ones we want. Now, I've been written up in the Rob Report, the New York Tribune, the Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine. I've got a lot of print media. I've also done TV, radio, and obviously podcasts. Every, I suppose, period, one becomes more exciting than the other. Stages are also another area of media. But at the moment, what's been the tag note for media over the past 2 years? It's always been fake news. So if prior to 2020, I said to you, hey, I can get you an article in XYZ magazine or newspaper, you'd be really excited. But today, we all know these things called fake news. We're now skeptical when we see you have an article in Inc. magazine or Entrepreneur. So in which case, the medium that works best today is the one that comes in within somebody else's credibility. You, for argument's sake, by you bringing me onto your show, I'm credible because people go, well, I like Adam, therefore Steve Sims must be something. I want to listen to him. Today, the best medium today is podcasts. Also, name another media channel where you actually get to vocalize your goals, your ideas, your values, for anything up to like 30 minutes. There's no other medium in the planet that allows that, and podcasts do. So I love podcasts. I know how powerful they are. I know how you get to play in somebody else's sandpit based on the owner of the sandpit's credibility. And by simply going on to social and just going, hey, I've got this happening. Who's looking for a guest for that podcast? How much does that cost me? And what's been the ROI on it? It just stuns me the more people aren't doing it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so now you're getting on multiple different people's podcasts. You've already been on in the last month or so since the book was launching. You've probably been on a whole bunch of others. I'm curious what's happening. Like you mentioned, kind of like a blanket statement, podcast is the most powerful.
Yep.
And I'm curious with your ROI, I'm curious if you've seen traction from it as well as just knowing that there should be traction.
Oh, no. And that's the beautiful thing about podcasts. Think about it. Where do you listen to your podcast?
I was taking a drink of coffee because I didn't know you were going to ask me a question, bro.
Look, this is how the game's played.
I listen to podcasts on my podcast playing platform.
On your podcast playing platform. What is that? Your phone, your desktop?
Usually my phone.
On your phone. Okay. What else is also on your phone? The internet. So all of a sudden, you're listening to this guy called Steve Sims. You're listening to him on the podcast. You can open up a browser. You can go in there and you can suddenly follow him at Steve D. Sims on Instagram. I can literally suddenly see the little blue follows appear and I can go, what podcast came out today? And I will also then ad hoc just reach out to a few of those people going, hey, I saw you started following me today. Why was that? Oh, I heard you on Adam's podcast. I heard you. And you can see directly, and this is the beautiful thing, you can engage in a conversation immediately. Well, Adam does loads of podcasts. Why me? I liked what you said about that. Well, great. Maybe it'll help you in the book. So you can immediately, and again, none of this costs anything other than effort. You can actually see how many blue marks start coming in, and you can look to see what podcast comes out that day.
So with you and doing the podcast and getting on other people's podcasts, you're seeing that it's working. I'm curious, what is your call to action? So what's the CTA during the podcast or at the end of the podcast that you're telling the listener what to do? I'm asking because I always hear that you're not supposed to have more than one call to action. And it seems like you're getting a lot of people following you on Insta. And so I'm thinking to myself, with these blue marks, are you saying go follow my social, or are you saying buy my book? Or what's kind of your call to action when you're getting on my show and other people's shows to promote your book?
So have we done a call to action yet?
No, not in this episode yet.
Okay. We've actually done 2.
Oh, just kidding. I was wrong.
So we've already mentioned the book. Okay. We've also just mentioned that I get blue marks when people go over to Steve D. Sims at Instagram. So we've actually dropped it in twice already. There's a lot of people that when they go into a podcast, they'll be like, oh, it's funny you should ask me that, Adam. You can find this chapter at this URL. And they do it like that. I don't like that. I like to have a conversation. If somebody out there is listening to this and goes, oh, I like what he's talking about, I like his tone, I like his enthusiasm, they've already been given 2 links. The book, which they can look up on Amazon or just visit me on a website. And I've also mentioned my Instagram page. Okay. So I've already given them 2 soft CTAs. But the way I like to work is I like to go, hey, this is me. If you want a bit more of me in your life, go and find me. You do not have to be the person. And in fact, I think it repels if you go, hey, you're going to want more of me, so you need to go. And you suddenly start flagging those things down. They're too much of a banner ad, and people will see 3 and they don't want to play with it. So I do soft CTAs.
I really love that takeaway. Like, I just want it to sink in. I want you to drop your mic. He's using a mic that he's allowed to drop. It's the Shure 58, and it's allowed to be dropped. But here's the thing. I love how you're saying that. Like, there's a couple of ways. I will try to make a quick example. It seems like in the past, the thing that worked in the 1900s, 1800s was the loudest person, the most forceful person, the most confident person got all the business. The person that was pushing, they were coming in push, buy my thing, you want more of me. It seemed like it might have worked back then. And then we started feeling resistant against it. And so we're pushing against. And so it's like these 2 magnets where the plus side is facing each other. The one person wants to sell, so they're pushing, and we're pushing away. And so we walk into the car lot, we walk in to buy a shirt, and somebody says, how can I help you? We all of a sudden we're like, you're not selling me. And so we say, I'm just looking. I don't need any help. I'm just looking. I'm fine. Don't help me. We know we're there to buy, but we don't want to be sold. And so what you've done is you're a magnet, and you've turned around to have your negative side, not negative bad, but the north or the south side facing everybody, where you're standing as a beacon. You're not pushing anything. You're just being who you are, being authentic. And when you're advertising, you're like, well, this is where it would be, but you're not being, it doesn't feel salesy. And so what ends up happening in my mind is you're this magnet north-south, and they're this magnet north-south. And because you're not facing the same direction, boom, you connect, and it really supports you. And I love that's how you feel about it. And I think that having your strategy of calls to action, soft calls to action, this is me, this is where you could find me, versus pushy, seems like a really effective route. Steve, out of curiosity, you've done a few things, and you said you liked a few things. You've got your company to promote yourself. You launched your own podcast. You're liking your podcast. You get on other people's podcasts. You get on stages. You speak. You keynote. You connect and do the satellite groups as well when you're keynoting. The question would be like, why all of these things? And if you had a focus, what would it be? And I think that might come from a listener that's today with us and just thinking like, crap, do I have to have a podcast and a book? Like, I didn't even know if I had time for either. And I'm hearing somebody who's really, truly successful, making a lot of money, has pictures with all of the other celebrities that we all know and love. And so that's what's working for him. Do I have to do exactly that? Should I do one of them first and then a different one later? Like, what should the listener take from your experience, your history of doing all of these things?
The one thing you need before anything, and you often get this chicken and egg, shall I do a podcast before a book? Shall I do a book before a great website? Shall I do a great website before my speaking gigs? Before that conversation comes up, you need two things. The first thing you need is impact. Okay, what is it that you talk about, say, that can help other people? Then you need to share that in-house in your socials, on your Facebook pages, on stuff that you haven't paid any money for. And you need to build up this big thing that everyone needs in their life, a community. You need to be able to stand up and go, hey, I'm very aggravated with how my grass gets brown so quick. So I'm starting a Facebook community on how to best look after your lawn. If someone's got browning grass, they're going to listen to you because you are now of value to them because you're answering a problem. Build up that and then maybe start a podcast, okay? And then build that up and then maybe release a book on how to make sure your grass doesn't go brown. So the first thing you need to do is understand what you're talking about and the impact it creates for somebody else. That's the key. Don't be one of those visual influencers that just looks good in a bikini and leans up against a car, because sooner or later, you ain't going to look good in a bikini leaning up against a car. And I'm sure as shit, I don't look good leaning up against a car in a bikini. But what I say is not there to excite you, it's there to aggravate you. And it's through experiences I've got. So community first, impact what you're doing, then go on the free platforms, which is every kind of social platform, and then go, okay, I've got a following. Now book, now podcast, now course, now coaching, but community first.
I want to make sure I'm taking the right notes. There's two things you need. The first was impact.
Yep.
What was the second one?
Community.
Community.
You see, it's no good you being able to solve someone's problems and then talking about it in the middle of a forest.
Okay.
No one's going to hear you. So understand what you've got first. Have substance with your solution, and then build up a community with people that have that problem.
What if the listeners thinking themselves right now and we're like, you know what? Steve's saying that I have to build a community before I build my podcast, but I thought that my podcast was how I built my community. So I'm not sure how to do that.
Well, no, the first thing you need is the answer. You need the solution. You see, you've got to understand, and we said about it at the beginning, media is any platform that can amplify your voice. It's newspapers, it's banners on the side of a coach, it's a sign in the sky, it's a Goodyear blimp, it's a podcast, it's Facebook advertising. Media are platforms to amplify your message. Here's the key. If you have no message, you're amplifying shit. So focus on your message first, then build the community with whatever media works first. And first, rather than launching a podcast and getting one subscriber and then being pissed off because no one's listening to it, build up your base on social platforms and then let them know that there is a podcast and get them to join your podcast. So that's the best way to do it.
I'm loving this. And I noticed a lot of that success is the same thing with me. I was very small fry. I moved to a brand new city and I never was an influencer by any means ever. And I didn't know how to do it. And so I launched a podcast and a meetup group, and I started being active on social all at the same time. And I was making a lot of mistakes, like a ton of them, of just different random mistakes. And after a while, I started to notice that because of the social that I was doing, my meetup and my podcast were growing. And so this is exactly what you're saying, but I had to learn it the complete hard way. It took me like a year or two to like finally fine tune it. And over a year and a half to have it fine tuned to say, man, the social is what's growing these other two things. And I think that comes to something that Gary Vaynerchuk talks about a long, long time ago. He says, If you're not active on social, he also said, and have a thought leadership platform like a book or a podcast. If you're not doing this by 2022, and Steve, it's 2023 now. If you're not doing this by 2022, you'll lose in business. And there's a lot of people losing in business because they're like against being on social, or they're against having a thought leadership platform. And it seems like that's kind of what worked for me. And that's exactly what you're talking about. The two things you really need is start with the impact and then go to the community. And I'm absolutely loving the thought that you have made. I think you've addressed it twice, but I haven't really pulled it out or extracted it since you said it. You talked about how you should focus on one of them first. Like instead of doing the YouTube channel, the book, the conferences, and the podcast all today, it sounds like you're saying, figure one of those out, get it all the way going. And after it's kind of in a good place, that's when you can maybe write the book or something like that. Can you touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah. You don't want to do anything that costs you money today. You may suck at it. There may be a lot of people out there going, I want to do a podcast. I want to do a book. I want to do a course. You may be absolutely shit at it. So what you should do first is do everything that doesn't cost you any money. And here's what I always say, and Gary's got it right. How much does it cost you to be on social? And the answer is nothing, okay? Because every single one of those social profiles is free of charge. But how much is it costing you not to be there? So people have often gone, well, what social platform should I be on? And I've got the exact answer for you. All of them. What you post on Instagram, you post everywhere else. If it's a video, you post across every video platform. If it's just text, then you're not going to be able to put it on TikTok. But the bottom line of it is everything that you post should go across every single platform. And you should just find out, first of all, if what you have to say is generating attention. And if you are answering people's problems, and if you are creating a solution, and if you are increasing the value, just keep doing that. It costs you nothing more than effort. But now you're starting, you can even, like when I did my podcast, when I started my podcast, literally, I went, and this was, I don't know, 5 years ago, I went on my Facebook feed and I went, hey, I've just done a podcast. Shall I start my own? And I just wanted to find out what people said. And I had a lot of people going, yeah, you should. And of course, what do my first few podcasts sound like? Shit. Because I didn't know how to do a podcast. I didn't know how to be a host. And there's a real difference. And you know this, Adam. There's a massive difference between being a host and a guest. The huge difference. So when you start, you're like, I don't know what. And it's very, very tough. So there's a classic line by Ari Meisel. Get going, then get good. But start using the socials because they won't impact your finances. It won't cost you anything. It is purely effort only to see if really you've got any kind of voice that someone wants to hear.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm processing everything here. A couple of things that I'm hearing that just need to be addressed is do everything that doesn't cost you money.
Yep.
I love that. I love that quote. There's a lot of organic stuff that we can do to kind of grow, and that's really great. Another takeaway is that you mentioned everything that you post should go on every platform. I have a question on that because some good marketers have said play to the platform. I've played apples to apples and Cards Against Humanity, either with my kids or with friends. And you usually play to the player. You usually play the card that you think that person will pick.
Yep.
And so play to the player on those games, but play to the platform on some of the social stuff that we do. And so, for example, the easiest way to do it is to copy and paste, and you just got like one post, but then you almost syndicate it everywhere. It's the same thing, copy and paste it in all the platforms. But at the same time, many other marketers say, like, on Instagram, you're going to want more videos than stories. On Facebook, you're going to want more images than videos. On Facebook, it's going to be more family friendly. On LinkedIn, it's going to be more business focused. So you're not going to put your kids on LinkedIn, and all these thoughts where they're basically saying play to the platform, meaning all of the different platforms, TikTok and Twitter and the ones that we've already mentioned as well, might have a type of person that consumes that type of content. and that there could be a concern by putting the same thing in the same way on all the platforms. I'm just curious, Steve, how you feel about that, what you do, if you tweak it or if you keep it the same, and kind of why.
Well, everything you've just said is bullshit, okay? And I'll explain to you why it's bullshit. If you phoned up 5 of your friends today and you said, hey, at 9 o'clock tomorrow, let's jump on a Zoom call and we're going to talk about the news. We're going to talk about the headlines. We're going to talk about what happened in America tomorrow at 9 o'clock, jump on this Zoom. When you jump on that Zoom call, everyone's going to give you the exact same headlines. Okay, everyone's going to tell you about the elections. Everyone's going to tell you about COVID. Everyone's going to tell you about the war. Whatever the headlines are, it's going to be the exact same headlines. Okay, but then if you said to them, okay, then where did you get your information from? They're going to go, oh, I got it from BBC. I got it from CNBC. I got it from ABC. I got it from CNN. Social platforms are media platforms where you choose to consume your media is the one for you, but the story's no different. And say, let me give you an example. You said apples for apples. Let's pick on Apple. When Apple's doing anything in their marketing, anything in their social, do they change it per platform? The answer is no. If Ford are releasing an F-150, do they release it on LinkedIn? Because that's a business platform? Sure as fuck they do. It goes every single platform because social platforms are nothing more than a point of consumption. And the one that works best for you is the one that's having the most conversation. Now, here's the dumb thing. I can post a video on TikTok. It could go nuts. I'll post that exact same video on Instagram. Crickets. I'll post it on Facebook that owns Instagram. It'll go nuts again. And then the following day, I'll post another video. And on Facebook, on TikTok, crickets. On Instagram, it'll go nuts. You can't dictate it. Anyone out there that says, right, this is what you do here, this is what you do here. If there was that rule, it's like me telling you what tickets you need to be purchasing for which lottery. No one's got an idea. The person that goes, well, Facebook is this, LinkedIn, who told you that? You know, no one's ever said that. You said that you don't post pictures of your kids on LinkedIn. You shouldn't post pictures of your kids in any case, unless there's a benefit behind it. If you put a picture of your kids up and go, hey, we all work hard, but remember what's important. All right, that's a good statement. It makes me rethink that I'm busy today and I haven't taken time to be with my kids. But shouldn't I know that on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, or whatever the next social platform is? Put it on every single platform. Where it's consumed, it'll be consumed.
Man, I'm loving it. All right, so a couple more takeaways. You said wherever it's generating attention, you want to generate attention. That's the big name of the game. And you mentioned that on some of the platforms, it might take off and a different post might take off on a different platform. Yeah. And one thing that I've noticed, and this is great for the listener as well, is if something starts to get some traction on, let's say, Instagram, and then they put it in, what is going to happen with an algorithm that Insta will have is they're split testing you against somebody else's post. And you won against this other person. And so then now they're going to split test you against someone else. So they'll put you in front of more of your peeps and even maybe sometimes people that aren't your followers. And then if that gets traction, then they'll keep putting you in front of more because Insta and any other platform, their goal is that they want to keep attention. And so if you're helping them keep attention by having a good post, then you'll be able to grow your podcast, sell your books or whatever. And then you mentioned these other two cool things, which was you kind of got to have a solution and value. So it sounds like when we're making content for a book, when we are having an episode on our podcast, when we're deciding to even have a podcast, when we are deciding to make a post on social, there's two things that we really need to make sure. We're solving a problem and we're adding value. And you mentioned don't post your kids on LinkedIn or Facebook or Insta or whatever unless there's a benefit to them. And so it's like the what's in it for me, what you helping a solution, are you giving value? we're not going to make a pointless post. We're going to make a post that's intentional. And I'm really loving how you're sharing that. So you decided to ask your audience if you should start a podcast. So you went on somebody else's podcast, you thought it was cool, and then you made a post. I think you said something like, I was just a guest on someone's, should I do my own? And 5-6 years ago, what happened? Did everybody say that you should? Did people say that they never even knew what a podcast was? Like, how did you decide to start a podcast because of that post?
Look, you want to find out if you've got a little bit of a following. And again, build up that community first. And I probably had a couple hundred people going, yeah. Few people go, what's a podcast? Oh, this is a fad, that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay. And I always look for an ROE. Everything I do in my life, I look for an ROE. We know what an ROI is, return on investment. If I spend $50 on Facebook and I make $200, that's a good ROI. But what's my ROE? Return on effort and energy. How much effort and energy do I need to put into something in order for it to feed me back? So when I started the first podcast, and there's a reason why a lot of podcasts fail between the 10th and the 20th episode, is because it's tiring. It's an obligation. It's a commitment. And it can be quite stressful, especially if you're using it for the wrong reasons. If you think your podcast is going to make you, Joe Rogan, and you're suddenly going to be selling it for $50 million, then, hey, there's only been one Joe Rogan. So, and there's millions others out there that can't even get $10 to sponsor. For me, I used it as an excuse to have conversations with interesting people that may have something they wanted to put out in the planet. They needed a platform. I'm now a platform. I'm not going to sponsor this out. I don't want to make money from it. It is a free platform where people can indulge themselves in what I have to say and the guests that I invite on. So in the early stages, it was a bit tedious. And then I started to get conversational and I started to get into my stride and I started to understand what the point of it was going on and why I enjoyed it. And so I continued it. But you've got to have the community that's going to be behind you so that you start getting some listeners and some feedback.
So one of the main things that you seem to be pointing out that you're getting value from your podcast is the conversations that you have with cool people. Yeah. There's this exercise that I've done a few times. What's the why behind the why, behind the why, behind the why? And sometimes when you go 6 layers deep, you start bawling because it gets so personal. I'm curious, you want to have good conversations, but if I could just ask you why and why and why a couple of times, what do the conversations do for you? What do you get out of those conversations? What do the conversations lead to? Is it money? Is it fame? What does the conversation end up doing for you? Is it just learning? Tell us a little bit about like the benefit that you're getting really through your podcast that comes from those conversations.
All of them. If I've got an interesting guest, then it gets shared. I get more viewership. I get more clients come to my speaking gigs. I get more clients asking me to coach them. I get more Sims Media. I get more followers. So if it's a good client, there's a good conversation with a good reach, I get all of that. If I've got a client in front of me that maybe specializes in real estate, I'm now getting educated. If I'm interviewing a client who's a specialist in social, it's like me getting a free coaching session. I'm now getting all of this advice on how I should be doing this. It's a great way for you to actually benefit you with the questions that your listeners want to ask.
Awesome. All right. I want to take a quick break. When we get back, I just want to find out any mistakes that you've made on your podcast that you can help the listener with, and then last advice, and then we'll plug your book one more time. We'll be right back. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, GrowYourShow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show. All right, we're back with Steve Sims. We want to find out any mistakes that he's made along the way, his best advice for you, a new podcaster, and let's hear about his book so we know where to go to find it. Go ahead, Steve.
All right. So the first problem I realized was that on a podcast, it's not about you, it's about your guest. So shut up and let them do more talking. Okay, that's the first thing. It's basically got to be 10-90. The guest has to be the one that's been talking. I did have some people on the podcast that weren't actually very interesting, and I was able to get rid of those quickly or come up with some technical difficulties that didn't allow me to actually record their episode. So make sure you've got the right guest and make sure they're doing most of the talking. But as a specification technicality, make sure you've got a good mic. That was the first thing I had. I think my first mic was a Yeti. It picks up all the bloody noise for everywhere. Now I have the Shure 58. I can drop the thing. I can kick it across the floor, plug it back in, and it's still fantastic. So make sure you've got a good mic. Make sure you've got good internet speed. There's nothing worse than the person going, they'll turn off. They won't wait for you. No one has patience. Good internet speed and a good mic, and you'll be good. And remember, it ain't about you. It's about the information that you can translate to those listening.
I love it. I love it. And then where do we go to find your book?
Very easy. Steve D. Sims, D for dashing and only one M in Sims, stevedsims.com or goforstupid.com, or just go up on Amazon and look up Go for Stupid by Steve D. Sims. And again, I'm Steve D. Sims. Anywhere you consume your media, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Steve D. Sims, you'll find me there.
Steve, thanks for jumping on, sharing a little bit about your book, some of your insights and your experience through podcasting. We got a ton of value on make sure we're solving a problem, adding value, making sure we're using social media to advertise, doing the free stuff first, making sure that we have two focuses when we're starting something. The two things we need is start with impact and then go to the community, build the community, have the audience, test your audience, and put the same stuff all over all the platforms, just like those big companies that you mentioned, like Apple do. Really appreciate it. And to the listener, the book link is already in the show notes. So it's going to be easy for you. You don't have to even memorize anything. Just scroll down. You can just click right there, grab the book. Also check out Steve's website. It's right down there as well. And the link to his podcast is right in the show notes. And so go down there, grab that. And if you do listen to his show and you love it and you give him a rating and review, tell him that you heard about him here. He will love to hear that. All right, you guys, I will see you on our next episode. It's going to be a solo episode where I'm just pouring into you and giving you the content that you need for your business. So don't go anywhere. I'll see you there.
By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.